Joining us now is retired U.S. Army General David Petraeus. He's the former commander of U.S. Central Command. He's also the former director of the CIA. General, it is great to have you and your insights here this morning. And as someone who is so familiar with what a motivated insurgency can do, and certainly the challenge they can pose, I wonder what your assessment is here of the Russian advance.
Well, frankly, Brianna, this is going terribly for Vladimir Putin and his forces. They designed a flawed concept with multiple axes of advance. They haven't weighted the main effort uh, into Kiev, the capital. After all, the main objective is to topple the government and replace President Zelensky with someone who is pro-Russian. They failed to integrate their air and ground capabilities. They're not achieving combined arms effects of infantry, armor, artillery. Their logistics are a mess. And on top of all of that, Vladimir Putin's actions have united most of the world against him, with countries like Germany and so forth taking actions that no one would have imagined possible just a week ago. So this could actually be worse for Russia than Afghanistan was for the Soviet Union. If you reflect back on that, they left in an orderly fashion. The regime they put in place stayed in power, in Kabul at least, for another 2 years until they cut off funding and the country descended into a civil war. And I just can't imagine, I invaded a country, if you will. I was a two-star general, a division commander of about 20,000 troops of the 101st Airborne Division and all of our attachments, 254 helicopters. And I can't imagine attacking a country in which virtually everyone hates us, as opposed to applauding us. And we should remember in Iraq, they did applaud us. They hated Saddam Hussein and his sons and his henchmen, and they were glad to see him go. Then things took a different course for a variety of reasons. But in this case, the entire country is united against them. Many of the adults who are not in the military or the partisan units are taking up arms against them. Nowhere is safe. You can never really rest. You can't refit. They can't pull maintenance on their vehicles without being under threat. And armored vehicles require a lot of maintenance, a lot of fuel, rearming, and all the rest of that. So the Russians, they may bring in the Belarusians. There are reports of Chechens who are quite thuggish, joining the fight and so forth. There's a lot of combat power. They will get frustrated. They'll do enormous damage to Kyiv in particular. They'll try to turn out the lights, literally. They may even starve the city if they have to. But at the end of the day, they aren't really even getting to the outskirts. And it's because, again, none of their lines of communication behind them are secure. So I would be at a loss as to how to take on this problem, having failed, because the Russians failed at the outset to take advantage of a window of a day or two when there were no real obstacles on the roads and so forth, because President Zelensky didn't want to mobilize the country and scare it until he really had to. So that's the situation here, and it is going abysmally for Vladimir Putin and his forces, literally at every level, at the tactical level, individuals, as you see, at the operational level, and certainly at the strategic level as well.
We've seen him twice since this started threaten the use of nuclear weapons. Right now, he's got his nuclear deterrence forces, and they've been put essentially on alert. So they are a step closer to being able to launch a nuclear weapon. Do you think he would do that?
Well, I would certainly hope not. But again, you don't ride on hope, you ride on reality. And what we need to do, number one, is take that very seriously. And then number two, we have to start thinking through, how do we provide Russia an out? I mean, you never want to put a guy who has nuclear weapons truly in a corner where he feels that he has nothing left to lose. So as the weight of the world is coming down on him, on his economy, his financial institutions, and his forces in the field, and again, the Ukrainian will is so incredible to see what they are doing, to see their president. He was a comedian who played the president on TV, and this is the role of a lifetime. He should get an Academy Award and many other awards for what it is that he's doing this. He's a natural. And to see all of this come together for the Ukrainians, who have nowhere near the mass that the Russians can bring to bear, but they're defending their homeland, and they're doing it with a home field advantage. So what we need to do is start thinking about, how does Vladimir Putin get out of this? What can we discuss with President Zelensky that can be provided in these diplomatic negotiations that are just beginning today to provide Putin some way out, but obviously not capitulating to the demands that he has placed on Ukraine or on NATO and the EU.
Do you worry? We've heard some people say he's crazy. Do you worry that he's unstable, or do you still see him as sort of the calculating Putin that many people assume he is?
Well, I think it's different than that. He is calculating, but he's calculating in a bubble of his own making. We've seen these sort of bizarre scenes of him sitting at one end of a huge room and all of his ministers, the subordinates on the other side. And it's very clear that he is not, again, in the world that the rest of us inhabit in a number of different ways. So his calculations are there, but they're just different. They're based on other factors and probably, undoubtedly, not just incomplete information, but inaccurate information. I mean, imagine being the one who has to report to him, "Oh, Mr. President, this is really not going well. This is a terrible idea that you had. You ought to go sit under a tree until the thought passes and let us solve this." Obviously, that's not going to be well received. So that's the issue that you have here. It is a very, very difficult one for the world when he starts to rattle the nuclear saber as he have. We have to be very calm about that, while obviously, again, preparing for that potential, that eventuality. And again, what he's going to do in Ukraine as they will lash out. And again, they do have quantity and mass. We've seen the columns of vehicles lined up. The question is whether they can actually get them to the right place, given how clogged the roads will be over time with wreckage and destroyed vehicles and so forth, and the obstacles that the Ukrainian military have finally been putting in, dropping bridges, for example, something they didn't do until about day 3 or so. So again, I can't overemphasize how difficult a position he and his forces are in, and therefore how important it is that we try to provide a way out. But again, keep in mind, there's still enormous damage that Russia can do. They have the rocket-launched thermobaric munitions, which literally suck the oxygen out of a room and out of the lungs of those who are in that space. He has a lot that he can do, and I fear that, again, in frustration, they're going to do a great deal of that. Just as I said, to turn out the lights, to turn off the power. But what has been surprising, again, is the inability to use the tools that we thought they had in overwhelming numbers. Their Air Force, their cyber capabilities really haven't been brought to bear. They haven't completely grounded the Ukrainian Air Force. So what they've done is really underwhelming. They're underperforming. There's a potential they could get their act together, but they're strung out on 7 different axes of advance. They are proceeding in the south. That has to be a worry for the Ukrainians, because that literally can lead all the way up to the southern part of Kiev. And then you could surround the country or surround the city, the capital, because you're on the north, you're sort of starting on the northwest, and they might come in from the east. But that's going to take quite a bit. And of course, that unit that is coming from the south has very exposed lines of communication. And again, I just can't imagine invading like this, as again I was privileged to do at the head of the 101st Airborne Division, and we send our 105,000-gallon tankers back, which we literally did, and they get interdicted, and you grind to a halt.
Yeah,
So
and
very tough spot.
it is tough, and we are watching it happen as we speak. General David Petraeus, I want to thank you so much for being with us this morning.
Pleasure, Brianna.